Hello! It's time for a fun story called Raising Dragons. Now, I think you know that dragons are an imaginary creature. We do not have any evidence that they ever really lived, but we sure hear a lot about them. This little girl seems to have a friend who's a dragon. Maybe an imaginary friend? I don't know. Before we start, are you ready for bed? Have you got your pajamas on or your teeth brushed? Are you ready for rest? Let's hear this story before you go to sleep. Oh, having trouble getting to the first page. There we are. Pa didn't know a thing about raising dragons. He raised corn and peas and barley and wheat. He raised sheep and cows and pigs and chickens. He raised just about everything we needed for life on the farm. But he didn't know a thing about raising dragons. Ma didn't know about dragons either. She made a real nice home for us, but when it came to dragons, she didn't even know what they wanted for dessert. Now me, I knew everything about dragons, and I knew they were real. At first, Pa thought the notion of dragons on a farm was just plain foolishness. I'm not too particular about fanciful critters, and I don't have any time for make-believe, he told me one day. So when Pa said he didn't want to talk anymore, I knew I better keep my opinions to myself. I did my chores with my thoughts in my head at one end of the barn while Pa worked at the other end of the barn with his thoughts. If you look closely at the picture in the sky, we see her walking along, we see birds overhead, and then we see some very interesting shapes in the clouds. You see why she might think dragons are a thing here. I remember the day my life with dragons began. I was out for my Sunday before supper walk. Near Miller's Cave, I came across something that looked like a big rock, but it was much too round and too smooth, not hard enough to be a rock. Carefully, I rolled it into the cave and went to fetch Pa. "What do you think it is, Pa?" "An egg, a big egg," was all he said. "Now you stay away from that thing, daughter. No telling what will come out of it." I couldn't tell if Pa was more scared than worried. "You just stay away, you hear me?" he said, pointing a finger. I always minded my parents, never had a reason not to, and I tried to mind Pa now, but I could not stay away. Day after day, I'd go to Miller's Cave to wait and watch and wonder, what is coming of that egg, out of that egg? One night I couldn't sleep. I got out of bed and climbed out my window onto the perch Pa had made for me in an oak tree. But a loud noise broke the stillness of the night. Crack! It was louder than 100 firecrackers on the 4th of July. Crack! I heard it again, this time louder than before. It was coming from Miller's Cave. At the first hint of dawn, I headed toward that sound. There in the corner of the cave where I'd left it was the egg. There in the corner where I left it was the egg, and pushing its way out, like I have seen so many baby chicks do, was a tiny dragon poking through that shell with its snout. It was love at first sight. "Hey there, little feller. Welcome to the world," I sang soft and low. As I stroked his nose, a sweet little purring whimper came from him. As I touched skin to scale, I knew I was his girl and he was my dragon. I named him Hank. Hank was just a joy to have around. He was a fire-breathing dragon, and he made sure he kept his temper whenever I was near. Pa wouldn't have seen the sense or the use of having a dragon around who ate you out of house and home. Thankfully, Hank preferred fish, frogs, eels, and insects to beef, lamb, chicken, and pork. And he did have a healthy appetite. Ma never wanted to know about Hank. Whenever I wanted to talk about him, she'd cover her ears and sing. She said that having a dragon around had to be worse than having a field full of critters. But it wasn't. Ma and Pa taught me about caring for living creatures from the day I was born. They taught me about raising lots of things, but they never imagined I would someday care for a critter most folks don't even believe existed. It did take a little time, but whether they liked it or not, Hank was part of our lives. He was an awesome thing, growing to be as big as the barn from tail to snout. Hank was very clumsy when his wings came in, but once he learned how to use them, we'd go flying mostly at night. Up until then, I had been afraid of the dark. The shadows and muffled noises and the complete quiet stillness always seemed to be waiting and watching me. I had seen our farm from up in my tree perch, but Hank showed me my world from on high, the way a cloud or a bird or a star just might be seeing me. Up there I saw things for what they were, and it was just grand. Pa was the first one to notice what he called strange happenings around our farm. One morning, with Samson, our mule hitched for work, Pa set out to plow the fields. But the work had been done. The ground was turned over and seeds had been sown. Pa was plumb flabbergasted. Who do you think did all that work? Hank and I tended the crops too. We pulled weeds and kept varmints away, and Hank even got me to school before the first bell. Even after all the good he's done, Ma still didn't want any part of Hank. But when a hot spell hit, her tomatoes began to dry out. Hank hovered above them, fanning away the heat. He saved just about every last one of them. Ma didn't admit it, but she felt beholden to Hank. That means she's thankful and she feels like she owes him a debt. She began fixing fancy gourmet meals just for him. Eel pot pies, frog leg pudding, and a fish and insect stew that Hank just loved. Day by day, Hank was getting bigger. Ma was uneasy about Hank's fire-breathing breath. Pa paced with worry about the corn Hank and I planted. There was corn growing everywhere. Ma cooked as much of it as she could, but there was too much. Just when it seemed like the corn would swallow up our farm, Hank grabbed Pa's shovel and dug a wide trench around the cornfield. Then he blew on it with his hot breath. "What in tarnation?" Pa screamed. Ma ran out of the house carrying a bucket of water, but it was too late. The whole field was ablaze. We couldn't believe our eyes and our ears. Pop, 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 pop. Hank was making popcorn. It took an entire week to salt and bag it. We sold it all at a profit. It was the first dragon-popped popcorn anybody ever saw or tasted. Oh, it was real good too. When Ma harvested her tomatoes, Nancy Atkins bought some. She claimed they had medicinal value. She said they cured her gout. Pretty soon folks wanted dragon-grown food like they wanted medicine or magic cures. But there was nothing medicinal or magical about it. It was just Hank. The crowds and attention decided his fate. One evening, Ma and I were sitting in front of our pot-bellied stove. She was shelling peas while I read Murdoch's Adventure Atlas of the Known and Unknown World, a book I'd gotten from the library that morning. In that instant, I realized what I needed to do. Come morning, Hank and I set out for the dragon-shaped land mass floating in the middle of the ocean. So this is like an island in the middle of an ocean. There were dragons everywhere. They put us up in their best hotel, invited us to eat in their best restaurants. Hank felt right at home. When I saw Hank playing and playing fly and chase, I knew he had found the perfect place to be. All in all, it was a great vacation. But at the end, it got real hard. I had to say farewell to Hank, at least for now. Normally, I don't get mushy at departing, but when Hank turned to me and called me Cupcake, I boo-hooed a heap. She's crying. Just as I was about to board my plane, Hank stood there on the runway trying to hide a wheelbarrow behind his back. His toothy grin lit up that cloudy day. That wheelbarrow was full of rocks. Ma squealed in puzzlement. "'Tain't rocks, Mother. They're eggs. Dragon eggs," I exclaimed. Pa beamed right proud. Each egg looked different from the rest. One glowed, one glistened, another one flickered, and one even sparkled. I stood admiring the lot of them, looking at those eggs. I thought about my Hank, for now he was out there somewhere in the world. I knew I'd see him again. Wondering when was the only thing fixed in my mind. But in the meantime, I knew what I had to do, the same way Pa knew that farming was in his blood. I knew that raising dragons was in mine. She's about to take care of a whole lot of little tiny dragons who hatch from those eggs. Cute story, right? So her dad thinks dragons may not belong on a farm. Eventually, he does help the family, though, doesn't he? That was kind of a fun story, wasn't it? I hope you enjoyed this story. I hope you are doing well and staying healthy and strong, taking care of yourself, getting enough rest. Are you doing that? Getting enough exercise outside, some fresh air. I hope we are together again very, very soon. You be good, and I'll see you.